It's important for me, for myself, to have a good year confidence-wise, and important for this hockey franchise to.
Paul Coffey earned his place in hockey history through pure speed. Not finesse, not creativity. Speed that tore open the neutral zone and forced defenders to back up the instant he carried the puck. He changed what a defenseman could be. 4 Stanley Cups, a Norris Trophy, and point totals that looked unreal for his position showed how completely he controlled a game when he accelerated. Coffey played hockey at a pace most players never reached even once in their careers. That is exactly why opponents targeted him. They knew they could not stay close when he opened his stride, so they turned to physical tactics. Slashes to the hands, hooks to the hips. Cross-checks delivered the moment he leaned forward. Every hit had a purpose. Stop the rush before it began. Break the rhythm before Coffey pushed the play into overdrive. The harder he skated, the more violent the pressure became. Teams built entire game plans around slowing him down by force. Coffey expected tough defense. He did not fear contact. What angered him was the intent behind certain players. The ones who aimed for his wrists instead of the puck. The ones who grabbed him from behind on zone exits. The ones who waited until a whistle to deliver a shove designed to provoke. In the biggest playoff series of his career, he faced constant attempts to chop away at his confidence and his pride. Those moments stayed with him. He never forgot who crossed the line. Some rivals challenged him out of respect. Others challenged him out of resentment. But a few challenged him with a level of hostility that made every shift a battle. They tried to strip him of the one thing that defined him, his speed. They pushed him harder than anyone else. They forced him to play angry. They shaped the list he keeps to this day. This list is not built on statistics. It is built on bruises, collisions, insults, and nights when Coffey felt targeted simply because he was too fast for the game at that time. These are the opponents who pushed him to the edge. Before we reveal the 5 names that pushed him to the limit, we need to understand the kind of player Paul Coffey truly was. To understand why Paul Coffey carried so much intensity into certain matchups, you need to understand the type of competitor he truly was. Coffey did not play defense in the traditional way. He attacked the game from the back end with a confidence that bordered on fearless. Born in Weston, Ontario, he rose through junior hockey with the same trademark stride that later shocked the NHL. By the time he reached the Edmonton Oilers, his identity was already set. Coffey did not wait. He dictated. His skill made him special, but his personality shaped how he handled conflict. Coffey valued respect. He expected opponents to battle hard and play honest. When players crossed the line, he took it personally. He did not enjoy the political side of the sport. He focused on the ice and judged players by how they behaved in difficult moments. When an opponent used cheap tactics or tried to injure him, the memory stayed sharp. Coffey also carried a competitive edge that many overlooked. Behind the smooth skating and highlight rushes was a player who demanded excellence from himself. He hated wasting a shift. He hated being slowed down. He hated any attempt to drag the game into a style that ignored skill. This mindset created tension with certain defenders across the league. They saw that speed. They saw that confidence. And they wanted to break it. Those battles shaped Coffey's view of his toughest rivals. Some forced him to think faster. Some forced him to fight through heavy contact. And some tried to push him past his limit through pure intimidation. These 5 names are the ones that stayed with him long after the final whistle. And now we begin with number 5. Number 5 is Larry Robinson, a giant on the Montreal Canadiens' blue line and one of the smartest defensive players Paul Coffey ever faced. Robinson was not the kind of opponent who yelled or tried to show off. He controlled games through pure positioning and a deep understanding of angles. Against most players, that was enough. Against Coffey, it turned into one of the most frustrating matchups of his early career. Whenever Coffey carried the puck against Montreal, Robinson was the first body he saw. The Canadiens played a disciplined structure that removed time and space. Robinson was the anchor of that structure. He read Coffey's stride better than almost anyone. Instead of chasing him, Robinson waited. He used long reach and perfect footwork to guide Coffey toward the boards. There was no panic in his defense. No wild swings at the puck. Just calm pressure that forced Coffey to slow down. But the rivalry was not just about intelligence. It was physical. Robinson had size, strength, and a willingness to make contact at key moments. He did not go after Coffey with reckless hits. He used short, sharp bumps to knock him off balance during zone entries. He leaned into him on puck recoveries. He battled for every inch along the wall. Montreal knew that Coffey was the engine of Edmonton's transition game. Their job was to neutralize him early. Robinson executed that plan with absolute precision. There were nights when Coffey left the ice boiling, not because Robinson played dirty, but because Robinson played flawlessly. When Coffey expected an opening, Robinson closed it. When Coffey tried to accelerate, Robinson angled him into traps. When Coffey attempted a long stretch pass, Robinson intercepted the lane. The respect was real, but the irritation was just as strong. Coffey felt like he was being challenged at the most personal level. His speed was his identity, and Robinson made him fight for every stride. Playoff meetings early in Coffey's career added even more heat to the rivalry. Montreal's defensive discipline frustrated Edmonton. The Canadiens forced Coffey into mistakes he rarely made against other teams. Each turnover burned into his memory. Each blocked rush made him tighten his grip on the stick. Robinson never chirped. He did not need to. His play spoke loud enough. For Coffey, Larry Robinson was a test of patience and pride, a rival who pushed him into uncomfortable territory, and a defender who demanded Coffey bring his absolute best every single shift. Now we move to number 4. Number 4 is Chris Chelios. If Larry Robinson challenged Coffey with intelligence, Chelios challenged him with irritation. Chelios built his reputation on edge and relentless pressure. He was sharp, stubborn, and proud of disrupting elite players. Coffey was one of his favorite targets. Their battles stretched across conferences and across different stages of Coffey's career, from Edmonton to Pittsburgh and later Detroit. Chelios never gave Coffey an easy shift. He attacked from the first stride. He poked at the stick. He leaned into every battle. He used subtle hooks in the neutral zone to knock Coffey off rhythm. Chelios understood that Coffey's transition game depended on timing. Break the timing, and you break the play. That was Chelios' strategy, and he executed it with total commitment. What made this rivalry so intense was the way Chelios mixed physical play with psychological tactics. He chirped. He bumped after whistles. He stared Coffey down before face-offs. None of it was accidental. Chelios tried to provoke emotion. He wanted Coffey to react. He wanted him to rush decisions. Many players ignored this behavior. Coffey did not. He valued respect, and Chelios crossed that line often. Their most heated moments came during games between the Penguins and the Blackhawks. Coffey carried the puck with speed. Chelios met him with hard contact along the boards or perfectly timed stick lifts that disrupted clean zone entries. Some nights, the matchup turned into a running battle. Other nights, it was quiet but tense, with both players waiting for the next opportunity to strike. Coffey admitted in interviews that Chelios forced him to think differently. Speed alone could not solve the problem. Coffey had to adjust his routes. He had to disguise his exits. He had to keep his temper under control. Chelios pushed him in ways that annoyed him, and that annoyance stayed sharp for years. This rivalry continued when Coffey moved to Detroit. Even as teammates fought their own wars across the ice, Coffey and Chelios seemed to find each other naturally. The contact never stopped. The stare-downs never softened. They played like two men who understood that neither would back down. For Coffey, Chelios represented a very specific type of opponent. Not bigger, not stronger, but relentless. A defender who refused to give him the space he needed and loved making elite players uncomfortable. Their clashes left marks that stayed in Coffey's memory long after the final buzzer. Now we move to number 3. Number 3 is Al MacInnis. If there was one defender whose presence alone could change the energy of a rink, it was MacInnis. His slap shot was feared across the league. His poise under pressure made him one of the most trusted blue liners of the Calgary Flames. And for Paul Coffey, facing MacInnis was always a warning that the night would not be simple. Their rivalry was born in the Battle of Alberta, a clash defined by hostility, pride, and two teams fighting for control of Western hockey. MacInnis did not chase Coffey. He contained him. He understood that Coffey needed open ice to activate his speed. So MacInnis cut off routes, pushed him to the outside, and used disciplined stick work to disrupt entries. He did not rely on big hits. He relied on angles. Coffey would accelerate through the neutral zone, thinking he had space, and suddenly, MacInnis would appear to redirect the rush. It was not flashy. It was simply effective. And it irritated Coffey every time it worked. But this rivalry was not only about defensive positioning. It was physical when it needed to be. The Flames played with a hard edge, and MacInnis supported that identity. Battles along the boards were intense. Contact around the net was unforgiving. And every turnover carried emotional weight because both teams understood how important momentum was. Coffey felt this pressure constantly. He respected MacInnis, but he hated how consistently MacInnis forced him into tight spaces. Playoff meetings added fuel. The Oilers and Flames pushed each other into extremes. Both sides believed they were the better team. Both sides believed they deserved the cup. And in those heated series, Coffey and MacInnis collided again and again. MacInnis used clean but punishing stick lifts to interrupt Coffey's acceleration. He stepped into shooting lanes to block passes that usually opened the ice for Edmonton. He treated every shift like a challenge to prove he could match Coffey's impact. Coffey later admitted that few players forced him to think as much as MacInnis. Outrunning a defender was one thing. Outthinking MacInnis required patience. It required discipline. It required a level of control that Coffey did not always enjoy using, and that is why the rivalry cut deep. MacInnis limited Coffey's greatest weapon and made him grind for results. For Coffey, Al MacInnis was more than a skilled defender. He was an obstacle that refused to move, a rival who removed comfort from the game, and a player who left Coffey feeling tested every time their teams met. Now we move to number 2. Number 2 is Mark Howe, a defender who never needed force to control a game. He used intelligence, precision, and flawless anticipation to shut down some of the best players in the league. For Paul Coffey, Howe was a constant problem, not because of reckless hits or intimidation, but because Howe read the ice faster than almost anyone Coffey ever faced. Their rivalry was shaped by playoff tension and by the pressure of high-stakes hockey, where every mistake felt heavier than usual. Howe was the backbone of the Philadelphia Flyers' defense during the mid-'80s, a period when the Flyers built their identity on discipline and structure. Coffey would pick up the puck with speed, expecting to blow past defenders. Howe refused to give him that opportunity. He closed passing lanes early. He angled Coffey into traffic. He forced him toward the wall where Flyers' support arrived quickly. Howe turned Coffey's rushes into crowded battles instead of open ice attacks. What frustrated Coffey was how clean Howe played. There were no cheap shots, no unnecessary slashes. Howe beat him honestly. Coffey prided himself on outskating everyone, yet Howe made him hesitate. That hesitation bothered Coffey more than any physical hit. Howe made him think twice before accelerating through the middle. He made him adjust his timing and disguise his intentions. Howe controlled the pace of their matchups by interrupting the patterns that made Coffey dangerous. The rivalry escalated in the Stanley Cup Finals. Flyers versus Oilers in 1985 and 1987 created intense battles with national attention. Coffey entered those series expecting to dominate. Howe disrupted that plan. He tracked Coffey stride for stride. He blocked entries with calm footwork. He anticipated stretch passes before they developed. Several plays became defining moments of frustration for Coffey. He carried the puck with confidence, saw an opening, and watched how close it instantly. These moments were not isolated. They repeated. Each time it happened, Coffey felt a mix of irritation and respect. Howe forced him to adjust more than most defenders could. He was one of the few players who slowed Coffey without using force. That challenge cut deep because Coffey valued speed above everything. When someone removed that advantage, it felt personal. For Coffey, Mark Howe was a mirror. A rival who reflected his weaknesses and exposed areas he needed to sharpen. He was also a competitor who carried himself with dignity, which made the rivalry sharp but grounded in mutual respect. Now we move to number 1. Number 1 is Denis Potvin. No rival tested Paul Coffey harder. No defender pushed him deeper into frustration. And no opponent stayed in his memory as long as the captain of the New York Islanders. Potvin represented everything Coffey hated facing. Strength, control, intimidation, a physical edge sharpened by championship experience. Every matchup between them felt like a collision of two identities, built to dominate the game in completely different ways. Potvin played heavy. He used contact with purpose. He used his body like a barrier and his stick like a weapon of control. When Coffey tried to accelerate past him, Potvin used short bursts of power to cut him off. When Coffey entered the zone with speed, Potvin steered him into areas where help arrived. When Coffey tried to create separation, Potvin closed the gap instantly. He made Edmonton's young star fight for every stride. The rivalry reached its peak during the early '80s when the Islanders were at full strength. Coffey was rising fast, shaping a new era of offensive defense. Potvin was already a champion and the leader of a dynasty that dominated the league. Their meetings were not simple hockey plays. They were battles of philosophy. Coffey wanted freedom. Potvin wanted control. Coffey wanted speed. Potvin wanted to erase it. In the 1983 Stanley Cup Final, Potvin delivered some of the most punishing shifts Coffey ever faced. He finished checks with authority. He used well-timed stick pressure to disrupt Coffey's carries. He forced errors that rarely happened against other teams. Edmonton lost that series, and Coffey left the ice with a burning resentment. He believed the Islanders crossed lines with their physical approach. Potvin was at the center of that anger. The next year, the rivalry intensified. Edmonton beat New York for the Cup, but the memories did not fade. Coffey and Potvin clashed repeatedly. Hard bumps behind the net. Board battles that felt like wrestling matches. Whistles that came seconds too late. Potvin never backed down. He enjoyed the confrontation. He wanted Coffey to feel pressure, and Coffey felt it deeply. What made Potvin #1 on Coffey's list was not only the physical battles, it was the emotional weight behind every shift. Potvin represented the one opponent who could shut him down using force, discipline, and confidence. He took away Coffey's comfort and made each game a test of pride. For Coffey, Denis Potvin was the rivalry that defined his toughest years, a defender he could not forget, and the one opponent who pushed him further than anyone else in the league. Now we move to the conclusion. These 5 names reveal exactly what Paul Coffey faced during the height of his career. Larry Robinson challenged his patience with flawless structure. Chris Chelios attacked his rhythm with relentless edge. MacInnis forced him into tight spaces and punished every mistake. Howe read his intentions and cut off the ice with quiet precision. And Denis Potvin confronted him with strength, confidence, and a level of pressure that shaped Coffey's toughest nights. Each opponent targeted a different part of Coffey's game, and each tested him in ways that few players could. Coffey built his identity on speed, but these rivals worked to take that advantage away. They refused to give him open ice. They crowded his exits, challenged his stride, and made him earn every rush. Some pushed him physically. Some pushed him mentally. All of them left a mark. Facing this group forced Coffey to sharpen his decision-making, disguise his routes, and stay disciplined even when tempers rose. Those battles carved his legacy as much as the trophies and records did. The list also reflects something deeper. The greatest players are defined not only by what they achieve, but by who they survive. Coffey survived nights when defenders shoved him, slashed him, and tried to break his momentum. He survived playoff wars and intense rivalries where emotions ran high. Through all of it, he kept skating, kept attacking, and kept pushing the game forward. His success came with a price, and these 5 opponents made that price clear. If you watched Coffey in the Golden Era, you saw a player who forced the league to evolve. You saw a defender who turned speed into a weapon. And you saw rivals who tried everything to stop him. Which matchup do you remember the most? Let us know in the comments below.